Welcome. Today we explore the self we never question, a journey beyond ego, reconception, and identity itself. Let's begin this journey.
We are blinded by our own version of ourselves, seeing beyond the person we believe we are. Have you ever wondered how much of your life is shaped by the person you believe you are? Not by who you truly are, but by the version of yourself you have created in your mind. Perhaps you think you are a kind person. Perhaps you believe you are always honest. Maybe you see yourself as someone who understands people better than others. Or perhaps you believe you are a victim of circumstances, someone who has always been misunderstood, ignored, betrayed, or treated unfairly. And because you believe this story about yourself, you begin to see the entire world through it. This is where something interesting happens. We become blind to ourselves. Not because we cannot see, but because we see only what confirms the person we already believe ourselves to be. We notice other people's arrogance, but fail to notice our own. We demand understanding from others, while refusing to understand them. And slowly, without realizing it, the version of ourselves inside our mind becomes more powerful than reality itself. We don't simply live our lives. We live according to the story we have created about ourselves. And sometimes, that story is wrong. Chapter 1. The mirror we don't want to look into. Imagine standing in front of a mirror. The mirror doesn't argue with you. It doesn't praise you. It doesn't insult you. It simply shows you what is there. But the mind is not always like that. The mind has a habit of becoming a selective mirror. It shows us the things we are comfortable seeing. If we believe we are good, we notice evidence that proves we are good. If we believe we are intelligent, we remember the times we were right. If we believe we are victims, we remember every injustice done to us. If we believe people don't appreciate us, we notice every moment when someone ignores us. And what happens to everything that contradicts our story? We often ignore it. This is one of the greatest challenges of self-awareness. We don't simply want to know the truth. We often want the truth to agree with us. And when it doesn't, we become defensive. Someone tells us, "You were wrong." Instead of asking, "Was I?" we immediately ask, "Why are they blaming me?" Someone tells us, "You hurt me." Instead of listening, we say, "But I didn't mean to." Someone tells us, "You have changed." We respond, "No, I'm still the same." But perhaps the other person is seeing something we cannot see. Perhaps they are holding up a mirror. And perhaps what we see in that mirror is uncomfortable. Self-awareness begins when we become willing to look, not at the version of ourselves we admire, but at the version we usually hide. Chapter 2. The story we tell ourselves. Every human being carries a story. Your story may contain childhood memories, failures, achievements, relationships, disappointments, dreams, and fears. You have spent years collecting experiences and turning them into an identity. I am this kind of person. I would never do that. I know how people are. I don't trust anyone. I am always there for others. Nobody is there for me. I am stronger than everyone thinks. I am unlucky. I am different. These statements may feel like facts, but many of them are interpretations. And interpretations can change. Suppose someone doesn't reply to your message. One person might think, "They must be busy." Another might think, "They don't respect me." Another might think, "They don't like me anymore." The event is the same, but the story is different. And the story determines the emotion. This is why two people can experience the same world and live in completely different realities. Our minds don't simply observe life. They interpret it. And once we become attached to our interpretation, we start defending it. We don't want to discover whether our story is true. We want to prove that it is true. That is the trap. Chapter 3. When being right becomes more important than understanding. Have you noticed how difficult it can be to admit that you are wrong? Sometimes the problem isn't the mistake itself. The problem is what admitting the mistake means to our identity. If I believe I am intelligent, being wrong can feel like an attack on my intelligence. If I believe I am a good person, being told I behave badly can feel like an attack on my character. So instead of accepting the mistake, we defend ourselves. We explain. We blame. We bring up the other person's mistakes. We say, "But you did the same thing." And suddenly the conversation is no longer about what happened. It becomes a competition. Who is more wrong? Who is more hurt? Who is more justified? And both people walk away believing they were the victim. Imagine how many relationships could be saved if people were willing to say, "Maybe I don't see the whole picture." Those words are powerful. Maybe I don't see the whole picture. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I reacted emotionally. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the other person had a reason I didn't understand. Maybe my version of the story isn't the only version. These aren't signs of weakness. They are signs of maturity. Because wisdom isn't the ability to always be right. Wisdom is the ability to recognize when you might be wrong. Chapter 4. We see others through ourselves. One of the strangest things about human nature is that we often judge others according to our own internal world. A dishonest person may find it difficult to trust others. A jealous person may assume everyone else is jealous. A controlling person may interpret independence as disrespect. A selfish person may believe kindness always has an ulterior motive. And someone who has been deeply hurt may expect everyone to eventually hurt them. Our experiences become lenses, and sometimes those lenses distort what we see. Imagine putting on a pair of glasses that make everything slightly darker. After a while, you might forget that you are wearing the glasses. You might begin to believe the world itself is dark. This is what happens psychologically. We forget that we are looking through our own experiences. We forget that our fears, insecurities, disappointments, and beliefs influence our perception. And then we say, "That's just how the world is." But is it? Or is that simply how the world looks through your particular window? Chapter 5. The version of yourself you protect. There is another version of blindness. Sometimes we become attached not only to our positive qualities, but also to our wounds. We say, "I am the person who was betrayed. I am the person nobody understood. I am the person who always sacrifices. I am the person who has suffered more than others." And these identities can become comfortable. Even painful identities can become familiar. We begin to organize our lives around them. When something good happens, we may struggle to accept it because it doesn't fit our story. When someone genuinely loves us, we may doubt them. When an opportunity appears, we may convince ourselves it won't work. Because the mind often prefers a familiar story over an unfamiliar reality. This is why healing sometimes feels uncomfortable. You are not simply changing your feelings. You are changing your identity. You are saying, "Maybe I am not the person I have always believed myself to be." Maybe you are not permanently broken. Maybe you are not destined to be alone. Maybe you are not always the victim. Maybe you are not responsible for everyone. Maybe you are stronger than your past. Maybe you can become someone different. And that possibility can be frightening, but it can also be liberating. Chapter 6. Other people are mirrors too. Sometimes the people we dislike the most can teach us the most about ourselves. Not because they are always right, but because our reactions to them reveal something. Why does one person's criticism make you extremely angry while another person's criticism doesn't bother you? Why does a particular behavior trigger you so deeply? Why do certain people make you feel insecure? These reactions can contain information. They can reveal wounds, fears, expectations, and insecurities we haven't examined. This doesn't mean every criticism is correct. It doesn't mean every person who judges you understands you. It simply means we should be curious. Instead of immediately asking, "How dare they say that about me?" we can sometimes ask, "Why did that affect me so deeply?" That question can open a door. And behind that door may be something we have avoided for years. Perhaps we are afraid of being rejected. Perhaps we desperately need approval. Perhaps we are afraid of being seen as weak. Perhaps we have built our identity around being perfect. Perhaps we don't know how to accept criticism. The goal isn't to blame ourselves. The goal is to understand ourselves. Chapter 7. The danger of thinking you know everything. One of the greatest forms of blindness is believing that we have already figured everything out. We say, I know how people are. I know what they are going to do. I know why they did that. I know what kind of person they are. But do we really? We rarely know the complete story of another human being. We see their behavior. We don't see their entire history. We hear their words. We don't hear every thought behind them. We see their mistakes. We don't see every struggle that brought them there. This is why humility is so important. You can disagree with someone without believing you completely understand them. You can dislike someone's behavior without declaring that you know their entire character. You can believe something strongly while still admitting, I could be wrong. That sentence doesn't weaken your belief. It strengthens your ability to think. Because the moment we become certain that we cannot be wrong, learning stops. Chapter 8. The world is bigger than your perspective. Think about two people standing on opposite sides of a mountain. One person sees the sunrise. The other sees the sunset. If they argue about what the sky looks like, who is right? Both. They are simply seeing different sides. Life is often like this. Two people can have completely different experiences and still both be telling the truth from their perspective. One person may say, life has been kind to me. Another may say, life has been incredibly difficult. Neither person has necessarily discovered the absolute truth about life. They have described their experience. Your experience is real, but it is not necessarily the whole reality. This is an important distinction. You don't have to reject your perspective. You simply have to leave space for another perspective to exist. Maybe your way isn't the only way. Maybe your understanding isn't complete. Maybe someone else sees something you don't. And perhaps that doesn't make you less intelligent. Perhaps it makes you human. Chapter 9. Learning to question yourself. Self-questioning is not self-hatred. It is self-awareness. Every once in a while, ask yourself, what if I am wrong? What if I misunderstood? What if the other person sees something I don't? What if I am defending my ego instead of defending the truth? What if my fear is influencing my decision? What if my past is controlling my present? What if the story I tell about myself is outdated? What if I have become attached to being the victim? What if I am expecting people to behave according to my expectations? These questions may feel uncomfortable, but discomfort can be useful. Growth often begins where comfort ends. You don't need to question every thought you have, but you should occasionally question the thoughts that control your life. Because a thought repeated for years can begin to feel like reality. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say to yourself is, let me look again. Chapter 10. The courage to see yourself honestly. There is a difference between being confident and being convinced that you are perfect. Confidence says, I know my strengths, and I know I still have things to learn. Ego says, I already know enough. Confidence allows correction. Ego resists it. Confidence can say, I made a mistake. Ego says, I had no choice. Confidence says, I don't know. Ego says, I know everything. The strongest people are not necessarily those who never admit weakness. They are often the people who can look directly at their weaknesses without running away. They can say, yes, I was selfish. Yes, I reacted badly. Yes, I judged someone unfairly. Yes, I need to change. There is enormous freedom in that honesty. Because once you accept what needs to change, you can change it. You cannot improve a version of yourself that you refuse to see. Chapter 11. You are not your old story. Perhaps the most beautiful realization is this. You are not required to remain the person you once were. Your past explains you, but it doesn't have to define you. The person you were 5 years ago may have made mistakes. The person you were yesterday may have reacted badly. But today, you can choose differently. You can question your beliefs. You can apologize. You can learn. You can forgive. You can change. You can become more patient, more humble, more understanding, more honest with yourself. Your identity is not a prison. It is a work in progress. And perhaps the reason we become blinded by our own version of ourselves is because we think we have already finished becoming who we are. But we haven't. None of us have. We are still learning, still changing, still discovering parts of ourselves. And that is okay. Chapter 12, Seeing Others Differently. When you begin to question your own perspective, something beautiful happens. You become more compassionate toward others. You begin to realize that everyone is carrying a story. The rude person may be struggling. The quiet person may be afraid. The angry person may be hurt. The confident person may be insecure. The person who seems distant may simply be protecting themselves. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior. But understanding and excusing are not the same thing. You can hold someone accountable while still remembering that they are human. And perhaps you can begin doing the same for yourself. You don't need to excuse your mistakes. You need to understand them. Ask, why did I behave that way? What was I afraid of? What was I trying to protect? What can I learn from it? Then move forward. Self-awareness isn't about constantly criticizing yourself. It is about becoming honest enough to grow. Chapter 13, The Freedom of Not Having to Be Right. Imagine how peaceful life could become if you didn't have to win every argument. If you didn't have to prove that your opinion was superior. If you didn't need everyone to understand you. If you could simply say, "We see this differently," and continue living. Not every disagreement needs a winner. Not every misunderstanding needs a courtroom. Not every opinion needs to be defended. Sometimes peace is more valuable than being right. Sometimes relationships are more valuable than winning. And sometimes silence is wiser than another explanation. When you stop protecting your ego all the time, you become lighter. You listen more. You learn more. You understand more. And strangely enough, you may become more confident. Because you no longer need constant validation. You know that being wrong doesn't destroy you. It simply teaches you. Chapter 14, Remove the Blindfold. So, what does it mean to remove the blindfold? It means becoming curious about yourself. It means looking at your beliefs and asking where they came from. It means separating facts from interpretations. It means listening to people without immediately preparing your defense. It means accepting that someone can see you differently than you see yourself. It means admitting mistakes. It means changing your mind when new information appears. It means understanding that your perspective is a window, not the entire world. Most importantly, it means realizing that you are both the observer and the person being observed. You are living your life while also interpreting your life. And your interpretation can be questioned. So the next time you feel absolutely certain about someone, pause. The next time you feel completely justified, pause. The next time you think, "I would never behave like that," pause. And ask, do I really know? Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. But leaving room for uncertainty can protect you from many forms of blindness. Conclusion, a wider world. We all create versions of ourselves. A version we are proud of. A version we protect. A version we want others to believe. And sometimes, we become so attached to that version that we stop discovering who we really are. We become prisoners of our own stories. We see what we want to see. We hear what we want to hear. We remember what supports us, and we forget what challenges us. But life becomes richer when we step outside ourselves for a moment. When we ask, What if there is more to the story? What if the person I dislike has a perspective I haven't considered? What if the person who criticized me was partly right? What if my greatest weakness is something I have been defending as a strength? What if the person I think I am is only one version of me? And what if I can become better? The goal isn't to destroy your identity. It is to make it more honest. You don't need to stop believing in yourself. You simply need to stop believing that your current understanding of yourself is complete. Keep the confidence. Lose the arrogance. Lose the rigidity. Keep your experiences. But don't let them become your prison. Keep your story. But remember that you are still writing it. Because the world is much bigger than the version of it inside your head. And you are much more complex than the version of yourself you have created. So look again. Listen again. Question again. Learn again. And whenever you catch yourself thinking, I already know who I am, pause. Take a breath. And ask yourself, do I really? Perhaps that question is where true self-awareness begins. Perhaps that is where the blindfold finally starts to come off. And perhaps, beyond the version of yourself you have always believed in, there is a wiser, calmer, more honest version of you waiting to be discovered. Not a perfect version. Not a flawless version. Just a more authentic one. And maybe that is all any of us really need.